Today I'm going to tell you about 8 black architects that faced tons of systemic barriers and adversity, and even through all that struggle, they still killed it and made a mark in history. Let's get into it. Number 1, Robert Taylor. Robert Taylor was the first black architect in America that was academically trained and properly credentialed. He was also the first black person to graduate from MIT in 1892. And Robert must have been a pretty cool guy, because while he was at MIT, he made really good friends with Booker T. Washington. Okay, we need to do a quick 30-second aside about Booker T. Washington. Booker T. Washington was part of the last generation born to slavery. He co-founded the Tuskegee Institute in 1881, which is now Tuskegee University, a historically black college in Tuskegee, Alabama, with alumni the likes of George Washington Carver, Lionel Richie, and my real-life Uncle Phil. He was also an educator, an author, and an advisor to multiple presidents. What I'm trying to say is that Booker T. Washington was kind of a really big deal. Anyways, back to Robert Taylor. So, after Robert Taylor graduated, Booker T. Washington was like, hey friend, I'm building a school. I would love for you to come and help me expand it. And Robert Taylor went on to design more than 25 buildings on the campus, including those for housing and museums, libraries, and academic buildings. And he also created the curriculum for an industrial training program for Booker T. Washington Institute, Liberia campus. Number 2, Julian Abel. Julian Abel was the first black architect to graduate from UPenn in 1902. He spent his entire 4-year career as chief designer at the offices of Horace Trombauer. He contributed to the designs of over 400 buildings, and some of his most notable buildings are on the Harvard and Duke campuses. He also designed the Philadelphia Central Library and the Philadelphia Museum of Modern Art. His rendering style was considered a work of art by many, and in 2016, Duke renamed their quad after him. It's about time, don't you think? Number 3, Wortner, Woodson, Tandy. Wortner Tandy started his architecture school in Tuskegee and was mentored by Booker T. Washington, but finished up at Cornell. While at Cornell, he and 6 other black men formed the first black fraternity, Alpha Pi Alpha. Alpha Pi Alpha currently has over 85 chapters and 185,000 members. He was the first registered black architect in New York City around the year 1910. He became good friends with Madam C.J. Walker, and she asked him to design her brownstone in the city. And then eventually his most famous work, her family home on the Hudson, a 34-room, 20,000 square foot mansion. A few of his other designs have been registered in the historic buildings in New York City, the Ivy Delph Apartments and St. Philip's Episcopal Church. Number 4, Paul Revere William. Paul William was the cutest architect in the 20s. Okay, but seriously, Paul William was a practicing architect in LA in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s. He was known for being the architect to the stars. He built homes for celebrities like Lucille Ball and Frank Sinatra. He also had a very unusual skill. Paul was able to draft upside down. He developed this skill because in the 20s, his wealthy white clients didn't feel comfortable sitting right next to him. So, with this skill, he was able to sit across the desk from them and draw where they could still see. Cray cray. Number 5, Beverly Lorraine Green. We finally reached the first woman in the list. Yay for progress. Beverly was the first black woman to become a registered architect in 1942. She had a master's in architecture as well as a master's in city planning and housing. And even though she was more than qualified, she found it very hard to get a job as an architect. As her career developed, she was able to get the opportunity to work with prominent international modernists, including Edward Durrell Stone on the Sarah Lawrence College of Arts complex and Marcel Breuer on the UNESCO headquarters in Paris. Number 6, Norma Sklarek. In 1966, Norma was the first licensed black woman in New York and California. Her most famous designs are Terminal 1 at LAX, the US Embassy in Tokyo, and the all-glass Pacific Design Center in LA. She was doing big things. She also designed one of my all-time favorite buildings, the Los Angeles campus of the Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising. Okay, I know that's a mouthful, but just look at it. It's weirdly cool. Number 7, Moses McKissack III. Now, he has an interesting story. His grandfather was an African-born slave that was bought and taught the building trade. His grandfather was eventually freed and carried down his love and knowledge of the profession to the next couple of generations. Moses and his brother started McKissack and McKissack Architects in 1922. In 1942, the firm won its largest contract, over $5 million, to build the Tuskegee Army Airfield. The firm is still going strong today and has recently completed the National Museum of African American History and Culture. Lastly, number 8, Clarence Wesley Wiggington. Clarence was born in Nebraska, but due to rising racial tensions, he later settled in Minnesota. Clarence would go on to become America's first black municipal architect. In 1915, this was an accomplishment because he never obtained an official architecture degree. But that did not stop him from building up more than 60 civic buildings and landmarks in the St. Paul, Minnesota area. And that's it. 8 black architects whose work has inspired America. If you enjoyed this video, click that like button, and if you want to see more, feel free to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.